Here follows an extract from my book Artful Designs, available from Amazon. Chapter 10, Part 2. Beth wanted to think things through, but was desperately short of material facts to contemplate. No doubt more factors to fit into the equation would appear as time progressed, but as yet there wasn't anything to occupy her mind. She filled the void with a technically demanding Mozart sonata. The sonata in F was a piece that she'd played many years ago at college when she'd first met Drew. Her piano teacher's promptings were still doing their job in the pencil markings on the score she had played all those years ago. The technical complexities of trying to remember the notes whilst figuring out the irregular rhythms of treble and bass combined to occupy her mind, while the simplistic beauty of the melody soothed her soul. She could remember, as if it were only yesterday, chatting over a mug of coffee in her teacher's music room. They'd discussed the lyrical qualities which Mozart's music always boasted. Although played on the piano, parts of the slow second movement at first suggest an oboe solo, but then transform into an operatic aria. At that time, Beth was studying La Nozze di Figaro, and she was convinced that the middle section of the movement reminded her of the Countess's plaintive aria. They were so convinced of the illusion that the opening lines of the libretto, Dove sono I bei momenti, was scribbled over the treble clef melody line. It was a long time since she'd played this sonata properly. In fact, she wondered if she had ever given it her proper attention, being mostly consumed by thoughts of Drew at that time. Now seemed as good a time as any to give it the proper concentration it deserved. Given the romantic nature of the aria she'd likened the piece to, there was a decided irony in her neglect of the music all those years ago, her mind being absorbed in a romance of her own. Where are all those beautiful moments of sweetness and pleasure? Was now getting the full works in its imagined application to Mozart's sonata in F, Adagio K332. Some hours later, Beth returned to find Drew and Noodle still sleeping, and was grateful that in her life, unlike the Countess, those beautiful moments of sweetness and pleasure still remained. She kissed Drew gently to wake him and went to put the kettle on. Seeing Benji pull into the driveway, she reached for another mug and also the tin of cupcakes still lingering from the previous day. Once suitably stocked with refreshments, the three sat and chatted over recent events. "Well, that was a bit of a shock, wasn't it?" asked Beth. "I know you expected Finn to resurface sometime, but I don't think you expected to find him in a rubbish heap, did you?" "We all expected to find the Constable in the bin, but not the culprit," said Benedict. "He wasn't exactly in the bin, though, was he?" said Drew. "In actual fact, we think he was, to begin with," said Benedict. "I took Forbes to the hospital to have a good look over the lad, and he thinks that he may have actually been thrown into the bin. The signs hint that the attacker strangled the foolish creature and then, presuming him to be dead, quite literally dumped him. Fortunately for Finn, this wasn't quite the case, and in a brief moment of consciousness he managed to climb out before he fully succumbed to his injuries. Fortune really did smile on the lad because the bin was quite full, giving him plenty of refuse to clamber up and climb out. It's doubtful he'd have had the energy to haul himself out of an empty one, as those trade bins are deep. The bruising around his throat and the decided stink emanating from him would seem to support such a theory." "The poor thing, he must have been terrified," said Beth. "It sounds like he's a regular scoundrel himself, but nobody deserves that." "Whatever he's been through, he's out of it now. He's totally unconscious and looks to remain that way for some time. The doctor has sedated him quite heavily, even though he was already unconscious. Apparently they do that to give the brain time to settle and heal after being starved of oxygen and getting a rattling. They've scanned him, but there's too much swelling to see much of any potential damage to his brain. Once the sedation wears off, if he wakes up, then they can decide what they're dealing with. He's got plenty of bruising showing on his head and upper body. Forbes gave him a thorough examination, but there's no knowing if this occurred before or after he was strangled. Because it was only to within an inch of his life, there's no time of death or stages of lividity to establish a sequence of events. It could be that all the other bruises are a result of being flung into a metal rubbish bin. It'd be heavy work tossing him high enough to go into one of those big bins, said Benedict. It was good of Forbes to go the extra mile and examine a live body, said Drew. I said as much to him myself when I thanked him for his prognosis. Forbes reassured me that the poor creature was more dead than alive, and so it wasn't too far outside his comfort zone. He's a good chap, and although it takes some time for him to admit it, he likes a bit of action outside the lab. He thinks it impresses the ladies. Not that his natural charm and twinkling eyes aren't enough to win them over in the first place, said Benedict. For the full book of Artful Designs, available in paperback or as an ebook, follow the link in the cards in the description box or find details on my website at sharonbill.com. Thanks for listening.